Okay, so here we are live once again. Let me make sure that I'm playing on the YouTube there. We're at about 10 seconds. It still says 0 people. And there it says 1 people. That's me on my phone watching it. And I'm sure there's going to be more people along shortly. But let's go ahead and get started, shall we? So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite Masters of the Universe characters. And we're also going to talk about this guy, Zodak. So the original Zodak always was one of my favorite Masters of the Universe characters. And you can see here, there's my Origins Zodak figure with his throne that I 3D printed. And I might try to 3D print this one again because I 3D printed this one like a few years ago. And while I'm happy with this print, it's obviously a very cool model. Looks very nice. You can see that they use the Castle Grayskull throne as the basis for it. And in fact, you could plug this into your Castle Grayskull if you're missing its throne. It also works as a reproduction throne. But they made a base for it. This is based on the DC Comics version of Zodac's throne that was in the special preview comic that was inserted into a lot of DC Comics that came out that month. And I do really like this model. I think that the designer did a really good job. I wish I could remember what the name of the designer was so I could say so right now. But I did think they did a very good job of this, and I printed it out in this kind of like goldenrod sort of color because I felt like that was out of all the filaments I had, that was, I thought, the most accurate to how it was colored in the actual comic book. And of course, Zodak had a gray throne on the Filmation cartoon. It was kind of a light gray, and it looked very similar to this, but not identical, like a little more simplified at the base. It still had like kind of like the 2 bracket looking things at the side, but I think the whole thing was more square. Bobby Wald is here and says Zodak watches one X-Men cartoon and has to try to one-up Professor X. Well, technically, there weren't any X-Men cartoons when this comic came out. I mean, like, there was one episode of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, and Professor X was still rolling around in a standard sort of wheelchair in that cartoon. They didn't have that fancy hover chair until the 90s when Jim Lee was drawing the comic. And I think he just didn't want to draw a regular wheelchair because it's hard. There's a lot of spokes and wheels and handles and things. Just design him a cool looking hover chair. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, Jim Lee actually even kind of cribbed that design himself from a John Byrne Hulk comic. I think it was the second issue of John Byrne's Hulk run where he had Banner had been injured and he was in a wheelchair, but it was like kind of a gold hovery floaty sort of wheelchair. So if you read that comic, that's obviously where Jim Lee kind of cribbed that wheelchair from. He just kind of took that and kind of beefed it up a bit, made it a little more substantial. But that was kind of the obvious inspiration. So yeah, the original Zodak was one of my favorite Masters of the Universe characters, like pretty much almost from the very beginning. I just thought he was really cool. And I wasn't sure if he was supposed to be a good guy or a bad guy. And my mom told me, well, he's not really either a good guy or a bad guy. He's kind of somewhere in between. He's kind of bigger in concept than being just a hero or a villain. He enforces the balance of the universe. And I'm like, wow, that just sounds really cool. And like, I think that confused a lot of kids. Moral ambiguity is not something that most kids are going to take to like that. I thought it was really interesting. But you know, on the Filmation cartoon, they made Zodak into much more of just kind of a standard good guy. You know, we didn't have so much of that that sort of moral ambiguity to him. And you know, like, so let's go all the way back to the very beginning to discuss the history of this character. So in the original Masters of the Universe line, they came up with a whole line of characters. Obviously, He-Man. And then you had the villains. You had Beastman, who was the original Originally, Beastman was going to be the main opponent of He-Man, and Skeletor was going to be like just kind of a sorcerer that was in his service. But I think eventually they realized Skeletor was the stronger character, so he should be the one that should be the leader of the villains. Kyrus is here, and he says, "Hey, Kyrus, good to see you." So, Skeletor then became the leader, and then you had other characters like Man-at-Arms, who I believe was always supposed to be a heroic character, and then you had Stratos and Merman. It seems like there's some back and forth as to which one was going to be a good guy and which one was going to be a bad guy, or maybe they were both going to be bad guys at one point, or they were both going to be good guys at one point. But if you look at a lot of early material, some of the early stuff says that Merman is a good guy, and some of the early stuff says that Stratos is a bad guy. And in fact, as I'm so fond of pointing out, the very first mini comic, when Skeletor is outside of Castle Grayskull with all of his henchmen, Stratos is there. So at least by that point, that late in the game, there was still a good chance Stratos would have wound up being an evil warrior instead of a heroic warrior. So, but Zodak, oh yeah, and then you had Teela, obviously, and you had another female character that was going to be a figure that was going to be called the Sorceress, and this character was the basis for the original version of the Sorceress, but as we're going to discuss a little bit more later, some of these characters wind up in the classics line just spinning off onto their own, these other versions of them, for reasons I'll get into later. But the original version of the Sorceress eventually metamorphosed into the goddess, as we saw in the DC mini comics, the second wave of mini comics, and later on that character was spun off into a separate character from the Sorceress that was called the Goddess, the Green Goddess, that we saw in the classics version, and the Eternian Goddess as we saw her in Origins. Try to wet my whistle a little bit. My voice is sounding a little rough for whatever reason. I'm not sick. I'm just kind of phlegmy. It's weird. So anyway, at some point, the people at Mattel decided that female characters don't really sell that well in boys' action figure lines, and maybe we should not have two female characters. Now, what they wound up doing was, since they already had two designs for a female character, is they included the Sorceress armor with Teela, the Teela figure. And then you could, they still kept the Sorceress / Goddess character in the mini comics, obviously. But if a kid wanted to play, like the figure was one character or another, all he had to do was put the armor on Teela, and now she was the Sorceress. Now, I don't think they ever explained very well that this was the intention of what to do with the action figure. So that resulted in some confusion. And a lot of the times, like on merchandise, like the little golden books especially do this, you'll just see Teela just wearing the Sorceress armor, the Goddess armor, the snake armor, even though that was never intended to be for the character of Teela. And they actually honored this on the Filmation cartoon. You never see Teela wearing the snake armor on that, but they redesigned the Sorceress to be a completely different look, looking more like Zor than looking like a snake. And you might be like, why are you talking so much about the Sorceress and Teela when you should be talking about Zodak? Well, because I just wanted to set the stage for this. Since they decided that they were only going to do one female character, that meant now they had a slot open that they had to fill very quickly. And they had to design a brand new character to fit this slot. And, they didn't have a whole lot of tooling, obviously, early on in the line. So they used Skeletor's arms and legs, and they used Beastman's torso. And the Mark Taylor, real quick, designed a new head and a new armor and a new blaster, and he came up with this guy, Zodak, with a C. And this is not the original Zodak figure. Obviously, this is the Origins figure, but the original one looked very much like this. It is an exact reproduction. There are some changes that they made, and I don't think they quite got the head to attach to the neck correctly. It sits a little low on the neck for my taste. The main difference I can think of between this one and the original Zodak, though, and this is an entirely new sculpt of the armor, too, by the way. It's pretty much the same design, but it's an entirely new sculpt. It does not have the bullets on the side that Zodak is supposed to have. But you can see that the nose piece of the armor is colored in red, which on the original Zodak figure, it was colored in gray. So Zodak wound up kind of originally the sorceress as envisioned in that original line was supposed to be not necessarily a good guy or a bad guy. She could go either way. And in the mini comics, she was pretty firmly a good guy. So that didn't last very long with her. But that idea of a morally ambiguous character, a neutral character, wound up making its way into Zodak. So, and I think Mark Taylor's intention was for Zodak to be just like a pure good guy, but it wound up not working out that way. And look at this. On the package, it does not say heroic Cosmic Enforcer. It does not say evil Cosmic Enforcer. It just says Cosmic Enforcer. And in my mind, that's as it should be. Zodak should be true neutral. But again, this is not Zodak with a C. This is Zodak with a K. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. We're going to get to that. So Zodak never appeared in any of the original mini comics that I can recall. He might have been in the background of one somewhere, but he certainly never had a big part. He wasn't in any of those first 4 mini comics because, like I said, he was a character that was created kind of at the last minute. So he wasn't available to Donald Glut when he was writing those things. And, he didn't make his way into a whole lot of the early merchandise. I think he's in one of the little golden books. I think he's in the Sword of Skeletor, but I think that's the only one. A very brief appearance in there, by the way. Bobby Wald says you should 3D print a night landing boat so Zodak can be riding on a Zodiac. I should 3D print a night landing boat just for Firefly, if nothing else. I know I had a model for a raft, but I never got around to printing it, unfortunately. I think it was Donman Art Collectibles made that one. I might see if I can find what I did with it. It's on my old computer. I might see if I can dig it up. So anyway, where was I? Oh yeah. So the first time they ever actually really used Zodak in any of the other media would have been that he got some real use in any of the other media was in the DC Comics, like I said, and he was used fairly prominently in the miniseries that they did, but more prominently actually in the special sneak preview Masters of the Universe insert that was put into various comics that came out that month. I had it in the issue of Batman. That was where I had it. And man, that's like one of my favorite single issues of any comic book ever made, because how can I not love it? You had the main story was Batman versus the Joker. And then you had a backup story with Batman and Robin. But Robin had been scammed by these con artists, and he decided to try to get the money back that he'd been scammed by disguising himself as Batman. But little did you know, Batman already had his own plan to get the money back, disguised as Matches Malone. So then you get Matches Malone fighting Batman fighting Batman. We'll put quotation marks around both of those words. And it's pretty interesting little story. And the main Batman story was illustrated by Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. And the backup story was illustrated by the late, great Don Newton, a very talented artist we lost far too soon, but one of the best Batman artists of the 80s, I think. Not very well remembered today, unfortunately. but those of us who were reading Batman comics at the time, we remember him, and he was great. And then the He-Man story actually guest starred Superman. So I had a single comic that had Batman, Robin, Superman, and He-Man. And that story was illustrated by Kurt Swan, who, in my opinion, as I've mentioned before, is the greatest of all Superman comic book artists. So yeah, a comic book that I very much enjoyed when I was a child, and still enjoy today. I'll still go back and read it sometimes, and it's a fun issue. Anyway, so yeah, then Zodak appeared, of course, on a few episodes of the Filmation cartoon, and like I said, it was pretty similar to the DC Comics interpretation, but like I said, they made him a little bit more of a good guy on that, but still very much the sort of like detached cosmic sort of entity. And that's where we start to get into some of the differences between that version of Zodak and this version of Zodak. So I want to say right off the bat, I really enjoyed how they portrayed this character on the 2000X cartoon series. And in fact, right before I started doing this episode, I decided, just to refresh myself with this particular character, to rewatch the episode in question, Snake Pit, which not only introduces Zodak into the 2000X series, but also introduces Cobra Khan and the Snake Men. And very much enjoyed that. And you see He-Man being captured by two Snake Men down here, but don't worry, Zodac's about to help him out. You can fit staff into the hand, and then we have the cross-cell artwork for Skeletor, who I opened recently, Zodak himself, and Prince Adam, who is sitting right over here. And he is going to be the last of this batch of 2000X figures that I have to open up. Don't worry, I got more on the way. If you've been enjoying seeing me open up these 2000X figures, I just have to wait for Tila and Merman and Web Store. Those are the ones that I'm waiting on, and probably try to get the some of the other figures that came out in those waves. At least some, if not all of the other figures that came out in the. I know I want to get Orko, but I could only pre-order so many of those at the time. I might try to pre-order them now since I can get them if I can get them on Amazon, because then I can just like buy a gift card and pay for it with the gift card, and I don't have to worry about getting charged later. But yeah, so in the 2000X series, they redesigned a lot of these characters, and some to greater extents than others. Like Beastman, the 2000X version of Beastman, mostly they made him bigger and made the colors slightly different. Merman, they took him, they harkened back to that cross-cell artwork, which was definitely a change that I approved of. A lot of these took a lot of more inspiration from the cross-cell artwork. Hell's Stratos that we were talking about yesterday. Like I said, he had the same sort of harness as what he had in the cross-cell artwork, as opposed to the original toy. With Zodak, they decided to do something that was a little bit further out from a simple, let's put a little more surface detail on this guy. Let's try to make him look more like the cross-cell artwork or whatever, or look more like the mini comic version. With Zodak, they decided to address a problem with the original Masters of the Universe line. And that is a lack of ethnic diversity among the human characters. Now, I don't think it's a controversial thing to say that the original Masters of the Universe line was one of the greatest action figure lines of the 1980s. And it did a lot of things better than any other action figure line. But one thing that it did not do better than every other action figure line was having a little bit of ethnic diversity to the human characters. Now, if you look at something like G.I. Joe, right from the beginning, G.I. Joe had a black character in there. And even then, Larry Hama made sure when he was writing the file cards to, give the white characters for lack of a better term, the white passing characters, I suppose, to give them some ethnic diversity, so that like even among white people you can have some ethnic diversity. So like Steeler was of Polish descent, for example, and then I think Flash was of Italian descent. Steeler, I already said Steeler. Clutch was Jewish. Zap was Hispanic, and so on and so forth. Scarlet was of Irish descent. Shauna O'Hara, or is it Shanna O'Hara? I'm not sure if it's Shanna Banana or Shauna Banana. I'm gonna go with Shanna though, because it doesn't have a U in it. I'm guessing she's Shanna. She feels like a Shanna to me, but we just call her Scarlet anyway. I always loved that that you had a redheaded character named Scarlett O'Hara, and she was from Atlanta, Georgia. So, but yeah, like most action figures of the 80s made sure that they gave us some ethnic diversity. Even a line like Thundercats, like I mentioned before, like while they aren't human characters at all, they're all like feline, humanoid characters. Panthro is obviously coded to be a black man and voiced by a black man on the cartoon. So, most cartoons of the 80s are pretty good about that. And Filmation, as a company, was always really good about that. After all, they were the ones who made the cartoon of Fat Albert. So, they were already, they made Super Stretch and Micro Woman, and they were Black Star. From there were rumors that Black Star was originally supposed to be a black man, but Lou Scheimer denied it. I'm pretty sure Black Star was supposed to be a Native American, and in fact, Brave Star, when they did that show later on, he was a Native American. So, and it's not like there weren't black kids that loved He-Man. Black kids absolutely loved He-Man. All kids loved He-Man, and I really like. I've mentioned before the bit on the Toys That Made Us with the guy who says that he wasn't black, but he was kind of dark skinned. I could imagine he was like my cousin or something. So it is nice that at least He-Man was kind of ethnically ambiguous enough that other races could kind of see themselves in him. I know that He-Man, for example, is very popular south of the border, and I figure a lot of that is because he's a very deep tan looking dude, and they can kind of identify with that down there. I myself am rather olive complexioned, so I appreciate He-Man being a guy with a deep tan. But yeah, they did not have any actual black people in Masters of the Universe until the very last year of the line, when we finally got Clamp Champ. But the Four Horsemen wanted to kind of address this issue and have a black character in their version of He-Man. And I guess they didn't want to just bring Clamp Champ in that early. Although there is a design of Clamp Champ, I believe it was made into a Staction figure. But yeah, so they decided, like, at first they were thinking about making Stratos into a black guy, but I think what happened was they realized that Stratos was kind of an ape-like character, and that maybe it wasn't the best idea to do that with the black character. There would be some unfortunate connotations to that. So yeah, we probably shouldn't turn Stratos into the black character. That didn't stop him from doing it in the Netflix He-Man in the Masters Universe, the CGI animated show. But I digress. So they decided not to race swap Stratos. But then they started to look at Zodak, and there were some early designs of Zodak where they designed him to look more alien, and I think he was supposed to have green skin in that version. But it was decided, why don't we make Zodak into a black character? Now, the way that Zodak was presented on the 2000X cartoon was much different from how he was presented on any of the earlier media. Because for one thing, Zodak on that 2000X cartoon was a much more of an unambiguous heroic warrior. And he was not as detached he was still kind of detached, but he was a bit more proactive and less of a passive observer of things. as Zodak was wont to do. And rather than being, just a guy who has his own blue-orange morality and is mainly interested in maintaining the balance of the cosmos, Zodak in this version was the arch enemy of the Snake Men, and was in fact very personally motivated by his hatred of the Snake Men, because apparently the Snake Men had killed his brother. So what wound up happening is this was a cool version of Zodak, and I don't think anybody's going to disagree with me. And if it had remained what it was originally intended to be, as an update of this version of Zodak, I would not have complained. I would have been absolutely fine with that. But the people in charge of the Masters of the Universe Classics line, and I think this mainly, when I say this, I'm really mainly talking about Scott Knightlick, the toy guru himself. His philosophy on it was he wanted to have as many characters in this toy line as possible. And it wasn't enough to just have this is a different version of Zodak, and he's a black guy here and he's a white guy. No, he wasn't going to do it. He wanted to have both versions of Zodak and the toy line. And the way to justify that in his mind was they had to be two separate characters. And these two characters were different enough. While they were originally intended to be, this was intended to be a reboot of this version of Zodak over here, they were different enough that Scott felt like he could justify having this version of Zodak coexist with this version of Zodak. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like it's very important to point out that they misspelled his name on this package. This is not Zodak with a C, this is Zodak with a K. Now, was this an error? Did they do this on accident? I'm suspecting not. Now, every time we've seen Zodak recently, he's been the Caucasian version of Zodak. And I say Caucasian in the loosest sense. He's Caucasian in that he has the same shade of skin as a Caucasian person. But I've said it before, and I'll say it again. This is a non-human character. This is not a human. He doesn't have enough room. Like this version, they kind of changed it a little bit. But if you look at the original toy, he doesn't have enough room under his helmet for a nose to fit. So I don't even think he has like a human nose under here. He's got fins on his hands. He's got clawed fingers. He's got those weird Skeletor feet. So why, even if they're boots, why do they have to have 3 toes on them? Like he's an alien. He's a creature. He's not a human being. Even if he does have a human skin color, he's not a human being. But this version of Zodak with a K absolutely is a human being. But yeah, we've only really seen the original Zodak in the Masterverse line. There's been 2 Zodak figures, and they were both the based on the original version of Zodak. And then we had this one in Origins. There's not been a Filmation cartoon collection version of Zodak, but I think that they should do a Filmation cartoon collection version of Zodak. And here would be my advice: if anybody from Mattel is watching this, and I have reason to suspect you are, not that I'm trying to toot my own horn, not that I'm trying to say I'm so important that you're watching me, but I think that they probably have people from the toy companies watching all of these channels. All the toy companies have people watching all the toy channels. So this is probably one they watch from time to time, if not every single episode. But if anyone from Mattel is watching right now, do a cartoon collection version of Zodak for the Mattel Creations website. Do it as a deluxe figure and have him come with the throne. That would be my advice to you. And hell, make it a 2-pack and throw in the Sorceress, because we still need a Filmation Sorceress as well. Bobby Wald says, of course they're watching. How else did they model King Randor after you? See? I'm just saying. Again, this isn't my ego talking. I'm not saying, hey, they modeled that figure of King Randor off of me. I'm not saying Mattel watches my show and saw me and said, hey, we should make our King Randor figure look like this guy from this video. I'm not saying that happened, but I am saying that if it did happen, that's what that figure would have looked like. So I'm just pointing that out. This is a really nice piece of artwork on the back, if I haven't said so. Very cool. So other than changing its race, they made a few other changes to this design. We'll get into talking about all that when we open them up. But yeah, like he wasn't just race swapped into being from a white guy to a black guy. He was race swapped from being some kind of alien creature that happens to be colored in a Caucasian skin tone into a human being that just happens to be colored in an African American skin tone. All right, so I've been talking for 30 minutes and we still ain't opened this guy up. So let's go ahead and get on that. I had a lot of setup for this episode. And I've been looking forward to opening this figure for a while. And the little sheet fell on the floor, but I don't really care. In fact, I was thinking about making my own custom of Zodak with a K, and I still might do my own custom of Zodak with a K since well, I'll get into that when I talk about this figure. Oh, by the way, check this out. I don't know if I showed this before. I 3D printed this. I'm pretty sure this guy just made a scan of the Aquaman's seahorse Storm, because it does look very much like how Storm looked in the Aquaman 2 movie, but it's made for Masters of the Universe figures to fit on. So I printed this out for Merman. So now Merman has a mighty steed. How about that? All right. He's got his own horse, a seahorse. But I figured if Aquaman can ride a seahorse, so can Merman. All right, so they've got his staff packaged in the back here. And they did not give him the blaster that the original Zodak had. But you can see some of the influence of the design of said blaster in this staff. And in fact, I believe that the prongs were originally supposed to be colored red, so that it would bring to mind that blaster. And then the Masterverse version, like I said, you can take the staff apart and have kind of like two stabs on it, and that one looks even a little more like the blaster. They had some elements of Zodak with a K in that figure, but it was still mainly Zodak with a C. Bobby Walt asked, "Do you save all your boxes? Otherwise, you have around Christmas time, Christmas package. You hold on log burn." No, I mainly tend to throw those in the recycling for the most part. Now, I could have sworn I cut this thing, but I guess I didn't. There are more rubber tabs at his ankles. And I thought I cut them already, but apparently I did not. So let's go ahead and get those off of there. All right. So there we go. And I'm going to put that back in there. All right. So the first thing I want to discuss with this version of Zodak is kind of an ironic thing about this figure. And like I said, the Four Horsemen, God bless them, and I think this was a good decision. Like I said, I approve of this decision. I approve the decision to race swap Zodak. I think that was a good choice. But here we got our Zodak figure, and man, he's awfully light skinned. Like for a race swap character, they certainly didn't lean very heavily into his melanin levels, did they? I mean, hell, we got let's see, somewhere around here. Yeah, we got here's the cartoon collection He-Man. That'll be a good figure to compare him to. And you see he's noticeably darker, yeah, but not as dark as he could have been. Now I'm gonna say this before anybody says it, and before we get any comments about it. Yes, I've just watched the episode. I'm aware this is accurate to the skin tone in the episode, but I think they should have made his skin tone darker in the episode. I would have preferred, if we're going to make Zodak black, let's make Zodak black. You know what I mean? I want him to have like a milk chocolate sort of skin tone. Like I want him to have that sort of skin tone. I want to see this guy and be like, that's a brother right there. Like this guy's like just just a little too light skinned. It's like if it weren't supposed to be a race swap version of, if this was just a new figure of Zodak with a C, and this 2000X version of Zodak just never existed, I would think this was a good skin tone of it. It's nice they gave him a little bit more of a tan than He-Man, but yeah, he's a little on the pale side for what I think Zodak with a K should look like. So that's the reason that I'm probably still going to make my own custom version, because I've got extra Clamp Champ parts. I've got extra Sunman parts. I can do a dark skinned Zodak. I think that would look really cool. So and one thing that I would like about this, I would like that would make this figure better for me, is if they gave him an alternate head, because Zodak does spend a good amount of that episode without his helmet. And I liked the design of the unmasked version of Zodak. I thought that was a very cool design, and it would have been nice to have been able to have an unmasked Zodak for this figure. But I guess it was just too expensive. Let's go ahead and take off his armor. And you can see that, unlike the original Zodak, where just pretty much just the red armor and that's it. And then you got like a fleshy neck. This version of Zodak was supposed to have gray armor underneath that went all the way up his neck. And I'll pop his head back on for just a second. I don't think there's supposed to be any exposed neck here at all. But I guess it was just, kind of the best that they could do in this situation. So that's fine. So it looks like Zodak's armor opens up at the back, a little peg here. You can see he's got that little bit of almost like a vestigial design of that jetpack that the Four Horsemen designed for Zodak. And the Zodak with a C has that version too, probably because they didn't want to make two different versions of Zodak's armor. And if we take off the breastplate, we can see that those mystical symbols that glow from his skin, those kind of extend a little bit further than that. Zodak's armor is very similar, other than the gray part and the back piece, to the original Zodak design. But I always liked the back piece. I always thought that was a cool update to it. But Zodak with a K also has white stripes on the abdominal section of his breastplate. And one thing that I really like about this figure, oh, by the way, before I put him back together, I just dropped his loincloth. There's a look at his furry trunks underneath. They did not paint the belt. I would have liked if they had painted the belt on this one, honestly, because it would have brought it back to the original Zodak with the white belt on his trunks. That would have been a cool thing to do, but oh, well, whatever. And we can get a better look at the markings on his thighs while we got that off. But yeah, his loincloth piece is mostly gray with a little bit of red over the actual middle part of the loincloth. We'll go ahead and put that back together. Did he not have a... Yeah, so there's actually two pieces to this loincloth. So when it fell on the floor, it fell apart. Now I'm going to have to try to find the other piece. Man, there it is. So this is actually a separate piece. That's kind of cool. So that'll open up some customizing options as well. But yeah, the white belt on this is a separate piece. I wonder how it would look if I just put the belt on without the loincloth. So we can get a look at that. And obviously it's going to fit kind of loosely onto the trunks underneath, because it's supposed to have that loincloth in between. But it still looks pretty cool to me. I think that still works. So that's an option you could display him with if you wanted to. So let's go ahead and get him put all back together. So I do really like this design, and I think they did a nice job with this figure. And I can't even criticize them for like him being a little too light-skinned, because like I said, that's how he was colored on the cartoon. But I can criticize the cartoon for making him too light-skinned, and they should have made him darker skinned, and then this figure could have been darker skinned. So I'm criticizing the design of him on the cartoon when I say I feel like he should have been darker skinned. So don't anybody at me in the comment, well, actually, that's how he looked in the cartoon. Yeah, I know that's how he looked in the cartoon. I just watched the episode like 10 minutes ago. So, and I really like these boots. These are great boots. A lot of good detail to them. Nice, heavily armored boots. I love this figure. This is a great figure. They did a great job with him. Again, nitpicking about his melanin levels aside, I think that this is a great figure of Zodak with a K. And it could be a great figure of just Zodak with a C if you just wanted to use it as that original character as well. So, here he is with the staff. You can get him into a nice two-handed pose with the staff. I like to imagine him kind of holding the staff up like this and blasting people with it. So it's still a blaster because it is designed to be, but it also works as kind of like a melee weapon, so he can bash people with it. And I think that the original design that Mark Taylor came up, they came apart in the middle. I guess I didn't have them back together well enough. The original design that Mark Taylor had for the staff was for the blaster was he was imagining it having like a hinge at the handle so he could turn it into a club. So this actually is probably more accurate to Mark Taylor's actual intention with Zodac's blaster, even if it's not 100% accurate to that design. It is accurate in spirit, so that's kind of cool. So I like that. I like that element of it. So let's go ahead and talk about the articulation. Get into his articulation. And Zodak can look up about that far, look down about that far, tilts his head kind of quizzically from side to side, rotate the head all the way around. Of course, the arms rotate all the way around the shoulders, and they raise up to the side about that far. Zodak has a single joint of articulation of the elbow, bends in about that far, rotates all the way around. He's got wrist articulation that rotates all the way around, and both of these hands seem to have a horizontal hinge on them. I don't know if this is a brand new hand sculpt, or if it's something that's reused from something else at some point. But I will point out that I don't remember if I've seen this before. I'm trying to get it so you can see it. It's kind of hard because it's white and it kind of washes out on the screen. You see that kind of rectangular panel on the back of the hand? He doesn't just have the standard Masters of the Universe hands. They're made to be gloves. And then on his gloves, there's some nice wrinkly texture to it, some nice wrinkly detailing, and these kind of little, I don't know if it's a pouch or like a little control panel or what, but that's a cool thing to have. And his belt has little pouches over at either side. So a lot of good detail, a lot of cool design to this character. Like I said, great figure. I'm very happy with him. Let's move on and talk about more articulation. So he rotates all the way around at the waist, but as tends to happen with these Cartoon Collection 2000X figures, I noticed the loincloth kind of sits kind of high on his waist. So when you turn him at the waist, his torso is kind of bend into that a little bit. Zodak can kick up about that far, and I think that his loincloth is kind of limiting him slightly, but not really all that much. He wouldn't be able to kick up that far anyway. He can do the splits, no problem. In this case, the loincloth is definitely getting in the way. I could probably get it to go further, but it wouldn't stay that way. And I'd run the risk of popping him apart at the middle again, which I do not want to do right now. Zodak has a single articulation at the knee, bends about that far, and then that rotates all the way around. And then Zodak has a boot cut, so the boot rotates all the way around. Zodak's foot can point down about that far, point up about that far, and then his foot rotates all the way around. So this is a great version of, is he one of my favorite Masters of the Universe characters? Because we know that, like I said, later on they retconned it, so it was indeed two different characters. But at this point in the character's history, he was supposed to be that original version of Zodak, right? But it was still spelt with a K. So again, why did they change his name on the package? Was it an accidental misspelling? And I meant to talk about this earlier, but I got distracted. I don't believe it was an accidental misspelling. I think they did this on purpose, even though whether or not this is supposed to be two different characters now, they spelled his name the same way on this package for one simple reason. This is my theory. I don't know for certain, but it's a theory that happens to fit the facts. See that little That little R in a circle right next to that C. You see that? That means registered trademark, baby. That means that they have filed a registered trademark on the name of Zodak with a C. Now, do they want to file a separate one on a character that has almost the same name but with a K? Well, why go through all that trouble? Why spend that money? This money can be put to other uses, right? So I think that that's the reason why this Zodak, who is clearly Zodak with a K, is being labeled as Zodak with a C. I don't think it was an error. I think it was just for legal purposes. That's what I think that was for copyright purposes. So and again, I could be wrong, but that's my theory as to how that happened. But like I said, you could imagine that this, like I said, originally the Four Horsemen intended this to be an update of the original Zodak character. So you could think of this figure as being that character if you wanted to. Or if you want to think that he is a separate character from the original one and have them both interact with each other in your Masters of the Universe world, hey, they're your action figures. You can do what you want to with them. That's great. That's what Mark Taylor wanted. Mark Taylor always said, hey, I have the He-Man that exists in my head, and everybody else has the He-Man that exists in their head. When the kids play with I have mine, Filmation has theirs. When the kids play with the action figures, they're going to come up with their own stuff. And I certainly did. I was going, when I first had these figures, I was going more off the mini comics because the cartoon didn't exist at all. But there were still elements of the mythos that we came up with when we were playing with the toys. Like, for example, I've mentioned before how my cousin, Amy, shout out to her if she's watching, she was the one who noticed that the lock of Castle Grayskull that was made so that the two halves of the power sword fit within it and unlock it, she was the one who noticed that Teela's flat hand could actually fit inside the lock. So Teela herself could unlock the castle. So that meant, in my mind, that there was some kind of mysterious connection between Teela and herself and the castle. And indeed, on the Filmation version, we found out that she's the daughter of the sorceress and destined to become one day the sorceress herself, and that her destiny is inexorably connected with that castle. And that wasn't something that was in any other media at the time, that Teela is capable of opening the castle without the sword, but it was part of our canon, wasn't it? That was something me and Amy, we did that when we played with those figures. So and I suppose every kid had certain things like that they came up with for their versions. And of course, my version of Zodak was a much more prominent character than he was in any of the other media, because I just thought he was so cool, and I just used him all the time. And sometimes he was a good guy, and sometimes he was a bad guy, at least from He-Man's perspective. From Zodak's perspective, he's always in the right. He's always doing the right thing. He might stop He-Man, or try to stop He-Man from saving a village from an erupting volcano, or he might try to stop He-Man from stepping on a butterfly and fight him to the death for either one of those things. But his motivations are a mystery to Zodak and Zodak alone. Bobby Wald says, I like it when they realized that they made the gate on Castle Grayskull too small, and Mark Taylor said, just shove them in sideways. And somebody rightly pointed out to him, that's not how kids play with toys. They want to walk the character through the door. And yeah, I'll tell you this. If I was a kid and Castle Grayskull has a door that was too small and the characters had to crawl through it, I would imagine that literally they had to crawl through the door to get into Castle. I would not take that as a figurative thing. That would be something that I would imagine this is how this is in real life. It's a tiny little door, and they have to get down on their hands and knees and crawl through it. It would not have even occurred to me to look at that metaphor as a metaphorical door or something like that. It would not have entered into my child brain. So whoever pointed that out, the Mark Taylor was right, and thank God they were able to convince him of that. So whether you consider this to be the original Zodak rebooted, or you consider this to be a separate character that just happens to have a similar name, Zodak with a C or with a K is a great figure, and I highly recommend that you pick him up. Any Masters Universe fan should be happy to have this figure in their collection. And I'll be back on the next episode to open up Prince Adam, and that will bring these to a close. And we've still got a few more Masters Universe toys to open up. And the movie, of course, is coming out on Friday. I'm excited for it. I can't wait to see it. I'm hoping it's good. Please be good. Please be good. But that's it for Zodak. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please make sure that you like and subscribe and all the fun YouTube stuff down below. Leave a comment and let me know what you think about Zodak and how he fits into your He-Man universe and what version of Zodak that you're going to consider this to be. And if you just consider both the 2000X and the original versions of Zodak to be the same character, or if you like that they're two separate characters. Personally, I like them being two separate characters because I like having more characters. But like I said, I could see me just as easily using this as the original version of Zodak. I think it works just as well for that. And I probably will do my own version of Zodak when it acts, or like Zodacs. Oh, wow. I just think I just created a new character accidentally. My own version of Zodak with a K, where I give him the darker skin. Because like I said, I feel like he should have some darker skin. Just saying. I'm going to do that custom figure eventually. Even though this one's great, I think that there's room for my interpretation of the character in there. So that is going to happen sometime soon, hopefully. I've got a lot of irons in the fire as far as custom stuff that I'm making. But anyway, that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed it. We will talk to you next time. Bye.